Hey guys, Coronavirus with George here. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. You get to see me, which is always a pleasure. And I'm going to give you guys my prediction for what's going to happen over the next 2 years. And so I wrote down a few things, and this kind of started because somebody had messaged me asking for, what I thought about what was going on. And so that's what I'm going to tell you. And again, my disclaimer, I'm not an expert. Everything I could say could be BS. So let's take a look at this. So how long will the quarantine be? That's the first question, right? So definitely at least a month where I'm at, where I live. The president suggested it for a month, so that'd be April 30th. Probably maybe into May, possibly June, but no longer than that, right? So a month, 2 months, maybe 3 months. And within the United States, of course, it might be more regional, whereas, if you see Europe, it's kind of by country, but the United States is kind of similar to the size of Europe. So here you might see it more like, this state quarantines and this state loosens up and things like that. But it could be more than a month. It could be a 2 or 3 months, but no longer than that, because at some point people have to go back to work, or else the cure will be worse than the sickness. All right. Will this go away? No, it won't. So here's what I think is going to happen, and I'll give you kind of a breakdown over what I think will happen over the next 2 years. And what I'm going to say could be affected by three things, right? And those are, is it seasonal? Do they find medications that work well on it? And is there a vaccine, right? So if none of those three things happen, if it's not seasonal, if we don't find any medications, and if we don't find a vaccine, I would say either this year or sometime into the end of the year next year, we're going to have, half the population in the United States would catch it, right? Which would be 150 million people. And what will happen is, we'll come out of this quarantine, and very few people will be contagious with it, because most of us hopefully will have stayed home. But then it'll start growing again, right? And then here comes the second wave. And the second wave will be much bigger than the first wave. And so eventually, if none of those three things happen, we get to 150 million or whatever, 165 million, let's say half the population, give or take. It could be 30%, could be 70%. But as the number gets bigger, it'll slow, obviously, because more people will have become immune to it. With that number of people, if it's 150 million people get it, 1% mortality would mean 1.5 million people would die. If it's 3%, that could be 5 million people. And if the hospitals are overwhelmed, which they would be at some point in the middle of that, then the mortality would be higher, and so we could have 10%, which would be 15 million or 16 million or something. So we could see, in my opinion, 1 million to 15 million people die if none of those things happen. Okay, and that was probably, the worst of that would be during the next wave. So we come out of quarantine in May, then June, July, August, it builds up. By September, October, November, we're peaking where tens of millions of people are sick, will have it, and not tens of millions sick, but millions would be sick, tens of millions would have it. So that's that. So what could affect it? Well, if it's seasonal, right, then we come out of quarantine and maybe it dies out over the summer. But then maybe it comes back next year. And then it wouldn't start spreading until September or October, which of course would buy us more time to either find a medication or find a vaccine, right? So that's good. But, of course, we would like it if it didn't come back. But seasonal things often usually come back when the weather gets cold again. And so you would see it slowly start up again in whenever the flu and other sicknesses start up, September, October. And then to build up to its peak, it would happen faster than the first time, because we didn't start to, or there would be more time, because this time we didn't get it in America till January. So it would be in America in September, October. So we would see it get up to, tens of millions of cases by January, February, something like that, right? Which is where we would get if we didn't do this quarantine. And then maybe we have to do another quarantine to prevent that. We'll see. So that could be in the winter of next year. This is if it is seasonal. So it would slow it down and give us time, but then eventually it would come back, and, we would have that really bad year where it would kill, a few million people. And then if that did happen, running with this scenario, the following year it would come back. But now the people who were most susceptible to this particular virus would already be dead, and a lot of people would have gotten it already, and even people who got sick from it would have now built up some immunity, and so it wouldn't be as bad. And then it turns into sort of a flu that comes around every year and kills people, but not as many as the first time, right? As somebody once said, every sickness that's a common sickness now, all the flus and things, was a pandemic at one time. So the first year or the second year would be the worst. The second year, I guess, it would be the worst. So that's if it's seasonal. Now, if medication comes out, right, then that changes everything, because if there's a medication that takes away the symptoms, right, the pneumonia, if there's a medication that makes it so you don't have to be on a ventilator, well, then that, now we go back to work, right? Now you go to your doctor, you're coughing, oh, you have COVID-19 here, go buy some COVID-19 fixer. And you go to the pharmacy, you get it, and you're better in a week or two. And, nobody's worried that you're coughing on them, because big deal. If they get it, they go to their doctor, they take that medicine. It may take time for this to, them to produce more of this medicine, but I think a lot of the medicines that are being tested, and I think they said there were dozens of them, these are medicines that are already out there that already exist for other things. So it's not like you'd have to ramp up production. There would probably be some in stores already. You might need more, but, it'd be a medication that already exists. So that would be a great scenario where, now it's not so dangerous. Now it's no big deal. So that's if a medication comes out. And I think part of the reason we're doing this quarantine is to buy us time for doctors and researchers to do these trials and see which medications work. And hopefully, by the summer, maybe we'll have a few that, take away some of the symptoms and keep people from dying from this thing. And then the third thing is a vaccine. Now, I wonder, and again, I'm not an expert, but as we think about vaccines, there are vaccines for the flu, and the CDC chooses which flu strands to put into the vaccine each year, and they work for some, and I guess what happens is the ones that they put in there you don't get because other people have been vaccinated for it too, and the ones they don't put in there sometimes spread. So if there's a vaccine for it, it'll maybe prevent some of these, but there will be mutations and there will be new strands of this. So, people will still get it, but, it'll be not as bad. And so maybe we don't have 10 million people dying or 5 million people dying. Maybe it's a few 100,000, and then, and then it rolls into a seasonal kind of sickness that, again, will mutate, and there will be variations of it, and some will be worse than others. So these are kind of my predictions. So in my opinion, best case scenario is there's some medication where you take it and now you don't get pneumonia, and now you're able to breathe. From what I understand, the pneumonia is the big factor, because once you have the pneumonia, you can't get enough oxygen. You got to be on a ventilator. But I'm not a doctor, so I don't know. There's probably other things too. But if there's a medication that stops those symptoms, and now it's just a cough and you're a little irritated, then that kind of brings us down from pandemic to, oh, it's a cold, big deal. So let's hope that's the case. Or a vaccine that hopefully takes away most of this, although there could be, again, mutations of it, and the new strands might not be taken care of by the vaccine. I'm hopeful that the worst case doesn't happen. I think there will be some medications that work on it, just because I'm an optimist, not because I know about these things that much. But I'm hopeful, and I think there will be some sort of medication, because there's already so many medications in existence, and doctors, I think, and researchers kind of know which ones they should be trying out that are going to work for these similar types of symptoms. So I think we're going to be okay. I think when we come out of this quarantine, within hopefully a few months, we're going to find medications for this. If we don't, it's going to be really bad. But that's my opinion. Thanks for watching. Like and share if you enjoyed this video.